Tonight, MERS, SARS, bird flu, mutating superbugs are threatening to wipe out mankind.
Do we think we rule the planet? No. They rule the planet.
Their attack is always vicious.
The majority of the exposed people will die.
It could lead to a viral Armageddon, a biopocalypse.
If you've got the lab, if you've got the scientists necessary, effectively you could come up with a zombie-type virus.
Whoa. And it could be your next-door neighbor who starts it all.
You need a table and a sink, and that's a laboratory.
Once the biopocalypse strikes, we may not know what hit us. What the hell is that? Until it's too late.
You're gonna have a huge death toll before you ever catch up with it.
Is the world going to be wiped out by biopocalypse? 28 days later, World War Z. We've all seen those movies where the world is coming to an end because of a terrifying superbug. What if that wasn't just a movie? What if those scenarios were a reality? Smallpox, the avian flu, drug-resistant bacteria. All these nasty superbugs are real. These things are alive, they outnumber us, and they are little mini killing machines. They are the 4 trillion little horsemen of the biopocalypse, and they could turn humanity into a wretched shell of its former self. These are all real scenarios that actual scientists working on infectious diseases are worried about. One of the most terrifying scenarios is that they might get help spreading across the planet by the most dangerous organism of them all, mankind. Before I get into what sort of dangers we may be facing, I need to find out how long people have been toying with these microscopic killers and how much trouble we could already be in. We're about to meet Dr. Sergei Popov. He's a former Soviet Union bioweapons expert, and he tells us that if this was a bioweapon, the contents of this bottle would be enough to kill everyone in this stadium. 20,000 people. Wrap your head around that, son. How are you, sir?
Good, how are you?
Thank you for meeting me. So a bottle full of deadly viruses could really wipe out an entire stadium full of people?
Yes, absolutely.
Now, how many different biological weapons were created in the Soviet Union?
I don't really know, but the Ministry of Defense definitely had huge stockpiles of biological weapons.
Like how big?
In the amount of tons, maybe tens of tons.
Tens of tons?
Yes.
So that's enough to wipe out like whole cities.
Absolutely.
States.
The whole population of Earth.
The whole population of Earth?
Yes, yes.
Wow.
It was actually the United States helped inactivate a lot of biological weapons in the former republics of the Soviet Union.
The United States probably, when they went over there, they were probably like, what are you guys doing over here with all this?
There were trenches, huge trenches filled with anthrax.
And a little tiny amount of anthrax will kill a person, right?
Absolutely.
This is very scary stuff.
Yes, yes it is. That's why nobody knew about it, and the Soviet Union made all effort to cover it up.
That's crazy.
Yes.
There are very few things less comforting than the words cover-up and trenches of anthrax used in the same sentence. Are those facilities under heavy security?
You could walk into those facilities and find biological agents available to almost anything. We were completely confident that the United States did the same and did it better.
That's right, America, yeah. There's been a bunch of movies that depict horrific nightmare scenarios where some sort of man-made agent gets released and wreaks havoc and destroys the population. Do you think there's a possibility of that ever happening?
Absolutely. They are correct when they describe what might happen upon the release of biological weapons, and they are absolutely wrong when they say that the cure could be quickly found.
What's the most frightening biological weapon that you know that was ever developed?
One of the most potent was the so-called hemorrhagic virus. Hemorrhagic means that they will bleed extensively from your nose, from your eyes, from your stomach.
Oh.
Sometimes more potent than the smallpox.
What can people do to protect themselves if something like this happens, if there is some sort of an outbreak?
Very little could be done. In fact, the majority of the exposed people will die.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, you just scared the out of me. Congratulations. Thank you.
You're very much welcome.
Wow. That was some seriously scary. And what's even more scary is what is happening today. I'm gonna talk to Charles Faddis. He was the head of the CIA's WMD terrorism unit, and he knows what kind of horrifying things are going on. How are you, Charles?
Joe?
What's happening? How scary is bioterrorism, and how much should we really worry about it?
The average person thinks there's like some finite amount of this stuff out there, and it's all under control, and that's not even close to true. If more people were really aware of the dangers that are out there, there'd be a lot of folks that were lying awake at night.
What diseases specifically are you worried about, and are you worried about engineered diseases that we're not yet aware of?
We're worried about a whole host of diseases. What are the big ones that people talk about? Smallpox. We don't hear a lot about it, but there are still stockpiles of it in the world. Right now, the U.S. government is so worried about smallpox that they're stockpiling 2 million doses of vaccine. There's another disease called tularemia that the Soviets worked with an awful lot. Their idea was knock a country out of commission. In other words, they were going to infect us with it and tens of millions of people would be hospitalized.
That's terrifying.
So when I was running the Weapons of Mass Destruction unit for CIA, right, our job is to track biological, chemical, nuclear, radiological material worldwide. Every expert I know, every person that's focused on the issue will tell you that the #1 threat is biological warfare. You know, we could have a terrorist group sending operatives here that have been deliberately infected with some kind of disease, some kind of pathogen, and it could happen tomorrow.
Like a biomartyr type of situation.
Exactly. You're talking about groups that are willing to use suicide tactics, so there is nothing that stops them from then utilizing that fanaticism to deliberately infect somebody and use them as the mechanism for spreading a disease.
I think the scariest thing about a biomartyr is that you would never see it coming. If someone wants to strap a bomb to their chest, there's all sorts of ways they can detect that. But if someone's a biomartyr, there's really nothing. Are you worried about engineered diseases that we're not yet aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, no question. There's a whole new bio business, and now we get these sort of do-it-yourself labs all over the country with sort of bio entrepreneurs. And folks are playing with engineering new organisms, but in the process, potentially creating completely new diseases. So there's a lot of concern about the idea of somebody mucking around with this. And now you have a pathogen released that is brand new, and nobody has any resistance to it anywhere on the planet.
Would it be even possible to stop something in its tracks?
If it's a disease that we haven't seen before or we didn't stockpile anything in advance, you're going to have a huge death toll before you ever catch up with it. You're going to find out when the first case gets diagnosed, which probably means at least 48 hours after the attack started, now you realize there was an attack. And by now, everybody that was infected has infected somebody else. So we're already playing catch up. Now you're going to try to engineer something while this is already raging, you know, kind of like a wildfire. That's not going to happen. You're going to lose a lot of people before you catch up with this thing.
There's one thing that Charles Faddis mentioned that really kind of freaked me out. He was talking about individuals that are running their own laboratories that may be doing experimentation on bacteria and viruses and might not even realize what kind of danger they're putting the rest of us in. Who are these people and what the hell are they thinking? I need to find out what Tony Kimmery knows. He's a journalist who's been investigating rogue experimentation across the country. Hi, Tony, how are you? And he says that it could be taking place right next door to you. This is something that you've been studying for a long time. You're on the cutting edge of this. What is your biggest concern?
Effectively, you could come up with a zombie-type virus.
Whoa. Coming up, you are a biohacker. What are you doing here?
People come in, they pay a fee. You can play with genes, you can play with organisms.
Is there anything dangerous here?
I'm not going to tell you that it's perfectly safe.
And later, you're gonna go to a shelter in Kansas where people are preparing for some sort of bioapocalypse.
Hello! I don't feel safe.
At the moment of truth, be that a viral pandemic or nuclear, I got a place to go. 7 billion people on the planet do not.
I'm dying!
Is the world going to be wiped out by viruses and plunged into a bioapocalypse? I'm talking to Tony Kimmery, and he says that we should be very worried. So this is something that you've been studying for a long time. You're on the cutting edge of this. What is your biggest concern?
This new threat now is the do-it-yourself biology labs.
What exactly are these do-it-yourself labs?
It's a global community of citizen scientists, amateur biologists, do-it-yourself bioengineers, and for very little money, you can create your own lab.
What is the kind of damage that one of these labs can do?
They're dealing with potentially seriously pathogenic materials. They're not regulated. Who knows who's coming and going? And these same resources that are available to the biopunk community are also available to terrorist organizations in rogue states. It's a real threat. Counterterrorism folks will tell you that they believe that the bio threat is the biggest one facing us right now.
What intelligence do we have as far as how much progress they've made in terms of engineering some sort of a new virus?
If you've got the lab, if you've got the scientists necessary, I mean, effectively you could come up with a zombie-type virus.
Whoa.
You know, something like a rabies virus that's manipulated with something else.
So like a 28 days later type scenario.
If it's well-resourced enough and they're the right people with the right knowledge, then you've got a real problem.
So these type of labs have the capability of producing a pandemic virus.
There's a lot of classified information out there, but the CIA, they've been following this. They have determined that there are some that have been able to develop some dangerous pathogens from scratch, whether hybrid or designer or the next influenza pandemic virus, and then spreading it around. That's got the greatest potential for killing a lot of people outside of a small tactical nuclear weapon.
So someone is gonna come along, create some sort of a virus that we really haven't had any exposure to yet, infect someone, they enter into a large population area, and then it spreads. Whoa. Okay. All right, guys, here we go. You ready? I met with a guy named Anthony Kimmery, and he is essentially an expert on infectious diseases. And one of the things that he's concerned with is biopunks. They're people who experiment with biological agents. They set up laboratories, and they start experimenting with different things.
Oh, God. Right now in some basement, there's some guy with a mohawk fiddling around with the bubonic plague. By the way, a lot of the punks I know, they don't need to order some bacteria or virus. They just need to take their pants off in a bathroom, and that spreads disease.
Well, listen, man, I'm gonna talk to Rob Carlson. He's a PhD from Princeton and a bio-entrepreneur, and he apparently is going to reassure me that this is not something to be concerned with, and that what they're doing is they're trying to create beneficial things. They're not trying to ruin the world.
Right.
And what you're gonna do is you're gonna go to a shelter in Kansas where people are preparing for some sort of bio-apocalypse, and they have set up this refuge.
Is this an above-ground place?
Oh, no, no, no. You're gonna go deep into the center of the earth.
Really?
Yeah.
You're going to talk to a PhD from Princeton, and you're sending me to an underground cave?
Listen, dude, you're gonna go to Kansas, you're gonna have a good time.
And that is the last thing he ever heard.
I don't know what Duncan is so worried about. I'm sending him to a safe haven, a shelter. I'm the one who has to go to a shady laboratory filled with viruses and bacteria. But the only way to find out what's really going on is if I go look myself. We're about to go into a real live biopunk lab, and inside this lab is Rob Carlson. He has a PhD from Princeton. He's one of the founders of the biopunk movement. Pretty crazy. Hi, how are you?
Good.
Thank you for meeting us. Really appreciate it.
Sure thing.
You are a biohacker.
Sometimes, yeah.
Most people, like if you tell them I'm involved in the biohacking movement, do they just stare blankly at you?
Some do, some raise their eyebrows in Washington, D.C., some get concerned.
What is the concern?
If you have biology in a garage, then some people think it's going to go to misuse, maybe.
Well, this place has rock solid security. Oh, no, it doesn't. There's wide open doors. What are you doing here?
What am I doing here?
What is anybody doing here? What's the purpose of this?
People come in, they pay a fee, they do their project. You can play with genes, you can play with organisms, and they might be working on anything.
Just anybody, all they have to do is pay a fee? Do you do any sort of background check on these folks?
Well, I don't know what sort of background check you think that might be appropriate there. But,
I don't know.
But
I mean,
do you do a background check when you get a driver's license?
No, you do not. So what he's saying is because you don't need a background check to get a driver's license, you shouldn't need one to run a biolab? Well, the last time I checked, you can't start a pandemic apocalyptic zombie virus by commuting.
In this case, right, there's some safety training, and people who are responsible for the place are keeping track of what goes on here, and they are talking to people, and they're looking over people's shoulders. But the security part doesn't bother me so much in this case.
Wow.
And I'm not the only one doing it. There are a lot of people out there who are trying the same sort of thing. So what's interesting to me about that is that I can make it as every other kind of company in our economy in my garage doing biology.
Is there anything dangerous here that we need to be concerned about?
In this lab, probably not.
Probably is a strange word to use there.
Well, there's always a potential for something to happen. You know, cooking in your kitchen, you've got sharp knives around, there's always a potential. So I'm not going to tell you that it's perfectly safe.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about the organisms. It's just being around a laboratory that could be potentially slightly dangerous.
You don't want to lick things, you know?
No licking.
You don't want to eat the stuff that's sitting on the bench.
Now, there are folks that have some concerns about the whole idea of biohacking, manipulating enzymes and bacteria. Are these concerns unfounded? Coming up.
You could potentially do something dangerous here, but you could do that anywhere. There are lots of labs like this, so the notion that we could actually prevent people from doing harm is not workable.
And later.
It will be ugly out there. The world's going to be devastated. It's going to be terrible. This is a Noah's Ark.
And you'd be willing to shoot people to keep them out.
There are thousands of people out there working in homemade labs who are toying with potentially dangerous biological material. I'm talking to biopunk pioneer Rob Carlson to find out how worried we should be about what they're doing in these labs. There are folks that have some concerns about the whole idea of biohacking, about manipulating these biologies, these enzymes and bacteria. Are these concerns unfounded?
In a place like this, they're unlikely to have access to or unlikely to be playing with anything that's a potential human pathogen. And I would hope that nobody in a garage or in a space like this does that.
So far, he's done nothing to calm my fears of a pandemic. And he is gonna give me a tour of a do-it-yourself laboratory so I can see what's going on and whether or not I should be worried. I relish any opportunity to wear goggles and rubber gloves. Now, when you see beakers and labs in LA, downtown, you think meth.
Right.
Is that a concern? Like, what if someone comes in and they've got a box of cold medicine and they're looking kind of sketch?
Presumably, the people who are in charge of any of these spaces are looking out for that.
Okay.
But it's also true that, you know, law enforcement is looking out for that. The last thing we want is to create underground labs where people are playing with biology.
How much would it cost to set up a lab like this?
A few $1,000s tops.
Is there anything illegal about this?
There's nothing illegal about this.
Okay. All right, so what kind of stuff can be done here?
In this space, we have art projects, we have a couple startups, and we have people who are just curious, like Joe Biohacker, who is in fact in real life a trained molecular biologist who knows what he's doing, but he hangs out here in this hacker space for projects that he thinks are interesting and maybe he can't get funded to do at a university or he's just doing for the fun of it.
That's just wild scientist style. Woo! You see when he throws those little plastic caps over his shoulders? That's the scientist version of doing a burnout in a parking lot. Totally unnecessary, but looks cool. Now, the real concern amongst people who are looking at these labs is biology being manipulated to the point of becoming a weapon, whether it's some sort of a new disease or some sort of a combination of diseases. Is that of any concern in any of these laboratories across the country like this?
What they're doing here, it's very straightforward. You could also potentially do something dangerous here. Gotta be honest about that. But you could do that anywhere. You need a table and a sink, and that's a laboratory. So the notion that we could actually prevent people from doing harm by closing down labs like this, stopping people from working like this, is not workable. It's the drug story all over again.
So if we outlaw tables and sinks, only outlaws will have tables and sinks?
That's exactly right. You know, the only way you can actually outlaw producing drugs is to outlaw chemistry.
Okay.
Not gonna happen. If you came in off the street, you brought all the raw materials with you, you could potentially do something bad here.
Between new emerging diseases and mankind's manipulation of viruses, our world might be headed for a biopocalypse. I just hope that Duncan's found a nice, safe spot for us to ride out the viral winter if a biopocalypse does occur.
I'm in the middle of Kansas, driving to one of the largest bomb shelters in America. Vivos. This used to be a storage facility for the United States military, but it has now been converted into a place that can withstand a biopocalypse or any other gigantic catastrophe. Hello? Oh, no one's here. Great. I don't feel safe. Hello? I'm dying! This is what happens if you're friends with Joe Rogan. What a wonderful place to spend the end of the world. Thanks, Joe. On the other hand, I know where I can come if the hits the fan. Hello? Hello, is anyone home? Hello? Hi, I'm Duncan.
Duncan, Robert Facino, welcome to Vivos.
Thanks. What is this place?
It's the world's largest private shelter. It's carved under a limestone mountain in the late 1880s. So this thing has already been here 120 years, withstanding the test of time.
Wow. And now it's here for what reason?
We're converting it to a private shelter for our members, that they may come here at the moment of truth, be that a viral pandemic or nuclear or whatever it is. We'll survive underground here for a minimum of 1 year without having to return to the surface.
You have a year's worth of food here.
Years worth of freeze-dried meats. We have a hydroponics area. This is another area for aquaponics. And then we have food storage here.
So this is completely self-sustaining.
Yeah, this facility could continue on indefinitely. We have a nuclear blast-proof door that'll withstand a 20 megaton blast.
20 megaton. What about germs? What about viruses?
Right behind that door, we have another set of doors that are airtight, pressure-tight, and watertight. Nothing gets in. In fact, no water. We could be submerged under several hundred feet of water, and it won't come in.
But this doesn't look to me like a regular bomb shelter. Here, you've got a wine bar, hot tubs. You have hot tubs in this bomb shelter.
We are trying to make it as comfortable as possible, including your own RV. We don't actually build out apartments or bedrooms or suites or anything. People drive their recreational vehicle directly in through the blast doors and park.
How soon do you think something like this could happen?
It could have happened 5 minutes ago. We don't know, but here's what I do know, that I got a place to go.
Right.
While 7 other billion people on the planet do not.
Can you walk me through what a viral pandemic might look like?
People that aren't prepared have to look forward to hell on earth. It will be ugly out there. You know, I've had people say, why would you want to survive? The world's going to be devastated. It's going to be terrible. Well, the one good thing about a pandemic is maybe it only affects human genes and humans. It doesn't affect animals. It doesn't affect nature, the water, the sky. Everything else is pristine. So to say that we're going to go out to something that's terrible, the earth has been scorched and it's ugly, and why would you ever want to live, isn't true. You know, why wouldn't you want to be a part of the next rebirthing of the earth?
I've been hearing about these biopunks who have started their own laboratories and are altering viruses. Are you worried about them starting up some kind of global pandemic?
Absolutely. There's not only that threat, there's dozens of threats. And to not believe it is naive.
Who has the final say?
The shelter director?
You.
Maybe. Maybe I'm not. At this point, I am.
And you'd be willing to shoot people to keep them out?
We'll be willing to protect the facility to save our members.
Coming up.
This place is operated tight because it has to be. If it isn't, you're going to have chaos. This facility is a Noah's Ark.
Where's the wine bar?
And later.
We will never win the war against microbes. It's not winnable. They rule the planet. These bacteria are now killing people, and we can't stop it. We're on a treadmill. There's no end game.
Between new emerging diseases and mankind's manipulation of viruses, our world might be headed for a biopocalypse. I just hope that Duncan's found a nice, safe spot for us to ride out the viral winter if a biopocalypse does occur.
I got a place to go.
Right.
While 7 other billion people on the planet do not.
Who has the final say?
The shelter director?
You.
Maybe. Maybe I'm not. At this point, I am.
And you'd be willing to shoot people to keep them out?
This place is operated tight because it has to be. If it isn't, you're going to have chaos.
This is amazing. Can you take me on a tour of Vivos?
You ready?
Yeah, let's see
go.
it. Where's the wine bar?
Let's go exploring.
Let's do it.
So we're cruising along inside an underground cave mountain. It's the same square footage as the Empire State Building.
Wow. How many people will eventually live in this place?
Well, we're planning 5,000. Could be a little more, but quite frankly, we could even double that. You know, the thought is this. These people may very well be the next genesis to restart this planet. Effectively, this facility is a Noah's Ark.
Wow.
Check, check.
Check, check, check.
All right, ready? So what did you think about the underground shelter?
It was definitely the creepiest place I've ever been in my life. We ended up driving into a hole in the side of a mountain in this massive limestone quarry with a man who compares himself with Noah and says that this place is going to be a new ark. They call it the new Genesis. Where it gets really weird is you ask him, like, well, who's running this thing? Like, who gets to make the decisions? It's like, well, you know, we'll see about that. But you know who's making the decisions.
Him.
Yeah, him.
So he'll be king of the world.
He is going to spawn. The one problem with the whole thing is that all that was down there was like 5 RVs. They hadn't developed much of it at all. The wine bar wasn't there, the hot tubs weren't there, the nightclub wasn't there. It was mostly just an underground cave that hadn't been developed yet. So if something awful happened right now and you'd bought space in there, you'd pretty much just be going to live in a cave.
What if a worldwide plague does break out and you had the choice between being on the outside and risking your life, most likely dying, or living with these guys in a hole in the ground? What would you choose?
Oh, tie me to the telephone pole and let the vultures eat my eyeballs out. I don't want to live in that underground RV park. I'd rather get eaten by wild, ravenous dogs.
It's absolutely terrifying to think that if you wanted to turn humanity into a bunch of raging, hemorrhagic maniacs, all you would need is 1 drop of the right deadly bug. It's a horrifying thing. I'm going to talk to Dr. Brad Spellberg from the Harbor UCLA Medical Center. He's an infectious disease specialist, and he's going to tell us where the real danger is. First of all, thank you very much for doing this.
You bet.
Now, knowing what you know and being an expert at this, what scares you the most?
The most terrifying thing that I am seeing is bacteria that we can't treat with antibiotics anymore, that have set medicine back 80 years, and patients are dying of those infections already. These totally resistant bacteria that are in hospitals and nursing homes are now spreading in communities and killing people, and we can't stop it.
Did you see World War Z?
I have not seen it yet.
The concept behind the movie is that there's a disease, and this disease turns people into zombies. Some rabies-like form of a disease that turns people into mad dogs. Is that possible?
One of the scariest things about being an infectious disease is that every few years something pops out and you go, oh my God, how did we not know about that? So, you know, HIV popped out in the early 1980s. Where was that before, right? SARS, monkeypox. Now, we have this Middle East coronavirus now that's killing 50% of people it infects. And it just popped up in the last year or two. That's one entirely feasible doomsday scenario that a lot of people are really worried about happening right now. See, we think we rule the planet. No, microbes. They rule the planet. They formed the atmosphere of the planet. They've been around for 3.5 billion years.
They formed the atmosphere?
Yeah. They live at the bottom of the ocean. They've been found alive a mile down the Earth's surface in solid rock. No matter what we throw at them, we will never win the war against microbes. It's not winnable. We have to keep a pace. We're on a treadmill. There's no end game.
Wow, that's a fascinating way to look at it. So we have to keep our endurance, and we have to constantly throw attention and money at this in order to just keep the population alive.
Absolutely. And in fact, microbes are the most adaptable things on the planet. The future of humanity and microbes will likely evolve as episodes of our wits versus their genes. They're still using their genes to adapt, and the scary thing is we've kind of stopped using our wits to keep up, and that's why we're having this antibiotic superbug problem right now. You know, each time you go back to the well, you got to come up with the next generation thing. It's getting harder and harder to do that. The low-hanging fruit is plucked.
What an incredibly complex problem, because on one hand, you have these organisms that are essential for life, can live in these insane environments that other life forms can't exist in, and yet they also kill us.
You know, people say to me, how far away are we from the iceberg? The ship has hit the iceberg. If these bugs spread, which they may well, that's when the lifeboats go under and we all drown.
Coming up.
I found what I thought were cactus spines in my arms. I don't know what they were. We were seeing these odd fibers in our skin travel across my eyeball.
Oh, yeah, I do see a scar.
And later, this was extracted from a woman's body.
There's some fibers.
Okay, what the hell is that? In any of the countless labs sprinkled across the world, but even without human intervention, these tiny mutating microbes keep finding ways to adapt and thrive. They continue to resist medication and figure out ways to spread. How in trouble are we? It's very spooky talking to these guys about diseases and the potential for some sort of a gigantic worldwide pandemic. I never thought it was a real possibility. I never really considered it. It is terrifying to think that there are new diseases and mutations sprouting up on a daily basis. Have you heard of Morgellons?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
For folks who haven't, I've posted a bunch of research about it at sci-fi.com. It is some sort of a new phenomenon that many people dismiss, including legitimate doctors. I've talked to a legitimate doctor in the field of bioweapons, and I said, what do you know about Morgellons? He's like, oh, Morgellons. You know, a lot of those people are crazy. Now, I've talked to some of these folks that have this disease, and it's not all crazy people. We got a hold of this video of this woman, and she needs help, and she doesn't want her identity revealed. Just check this out.
Hi, Joe. I've had a disease they call Morgellons for about 15 years now. Strange fibers that aren't able to be identified come out of my body, and I sure would like to have some help finding out what they are. I've got a little handheld microscope, and I can show you a picture of what's on my skin. This is a typical fiber that we have. Oh, there's a black one. Oh, and there's one of those long ones. The stuff that's actually on my hand is like a callus. Joe, I'm going to give you all the slides that I've kept for so long, and please just look at it. And not just for me, but for a whole community of people that are being knocked out of society.
Morgellons is another example of strange things that can happen to the human body. Is Morgellons one of those mutations that Dr. Spellberg warned me about? Whatever it is, this creepy condition, disease, is affecting more and more people every day. One of them is Dr. Greg Smith, who not only studies Morgellons, but actually has it. Dr. Smith may seem a little unusual, but what he has to say is really odd.
Public knowledge about this disease needs to just continue to be expanded.
How did you realize you had it?
I found what I thought were cactus spines in my arms, but they don't really look like cactus spines. As a physician, I've studied all the anatomy and the physiology of the skin, and this wasn't normal at all.
Like, what kind of odd stuff was happening?
We were seeing these odd fibers in our skin, as well as other unusual things. I don't know what those things are. I don't know what they were. But I happened to get one of these little specks in my eye. Okay, so I took my glasses off, went in and looked at my eye, and this was totally the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my life. That piece of fluff traveled across my eyeball. It hurt like a son of a gun as it went across the cornea, and then started digging in right on the edge. And if you can see that scar there.
Oh, yeah, I do see a scar.
Do you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, in your eyeball itself?
Top of the eyeball, right.
Yeah.
So you had this Morgellons lesion in your eyeball itself?
What it was a little fluff ball. It's really little tiny balls of fibers intertwined together.
Uh-huh.
Something's got to be stimulating the body to cause this.
Right.
There is a significant amount of not just neurological, but psychiatric symptoms from this disorder. And that's hard for people who are not medical and who are sick and whose brain is not working well because they've got the Morgellons.
And it probably supports the idea that it's a psychosomatic illness, or at least clouds the waters.
It clouds the waters big time.
What are your theories about the origins of this disease? Do you have a theory yourself?
The research that has been done most recently, the last couple of years, about Morgellons shows that these systemic symptoms are related to Lyme disease. I think this Morgellons is probably something else along with it that causes the funky fibers.
So Lyme disease, a disease that compromises the immune system, might leave you susceptible to this?
So far, the vast majority of patients who have Morgellons, when tested appropriately, will also be found to have Lyme disease.
Completely makes sense that you're dealing with something that's an undiagnosed...
It's something that's really new, it's funky.
You've helped us quite a bit. Thank you very much. I feel bad for Dr. Greg Smith. If I thought I had fibers crawling across my eyeballs, I think I'd be suffering too. So we need to find out what exactly is this Morgellons disease, and is it a part of this biopocalypse that we keep hearing about? We had a podcast listener that sent us some samples of things that she had pulled from her body, and we're gonna bring them to SEAL Labs and see if we can get some answers. Are you familiar with Morgellons?
Somewhat familiar.
But you've obviously seen a lot of different things under microscopes.
Oh, correct. Basically, what I do is forensic analysis, dealing with materials.
So you have at least a reasonable idea of whether something's biological, non-biological fiber.
Sure.
That supposedly came from a woman's body. So we're gonna open it now for the first time since it was taken out of this woman. Check that out. Still sealed?
Still sealed. Want to go ahead and open it up?
Yeah, go ahead.
So over here, we're at 50X. There's several objects. What we can do is kind of first look around, see what we see, if there's anything that stands out.
On first glance, what does this look like to you?
There's some fibers there.
Does it look like hair? I mean, what is it? Does it look like plastic, if you had to guess?
Usually hair leaves certain indentations as it's growing.
Sort of like, almost like bark, right?
Bark, and this one looks very smooth.
Very uniform.
Very uniform.
Wow, that's really weird. See what we got here. That looks very different.
And when you look at it over here, it's almost like some type of coloring on there.
Very different from the other sample.
Very different.
Okay, what the hell is that?
That, I have no clue.
A podcast listener claims that she is suffering from the odd and controversial disease called Morgellons, where strange fibers supposedly grow out of your skin. She sent us some samples, and we have brought them to a laboratory to see if we can get some explanations. Okay, what the hell is that?
That, I have no clue. I wouldn't be able to tell you what it is without further analysis, but we can go into the scanning electron microscope. We would have better focus. We can actually analyze it and probably give you like what it consists of.
Okay, sounds good.
Elemental-wise.
If he doesn't know what he's looking at, I sure as hell don't. So we're gonna have to look at this in a more powerful microscope, a scanning electron microscope that can magnify up to 100,000 times, and hopefully it'll shed some light on what was sent to me. Do you ever think that when you're working here alone that maybe there could be an accident and you could develop superpowers?
Yeah, sometimes.
I would. That's all I would think about. Wow. So what are we looking at here? Like, this is what magnification?
Right now it's 290, and I'm making a couple of adjustments. This is 1600x.
Wow.
About 100,000x.
What a bunch of creepy looking things.
Wow, I've seen that before.
Look at this right here. What does that look like to you?
These look like diatomaceous earth.
Diatomaceous earth. What is diatomaceous earth?
Like ocean life that has been dead for eons. They use it for swimming pool filters, organic pesticide for plants.
Yeah, it looks like little sponges or filters.
Right.
So is it possible that that's human skin?
No. It is organic, it's just not human.
So it's not from a human body, definitely?
Right. There's nothing to indicate that this came out of a human.
Wow. So what exactly is Morgellons? I'm convinced that Morgellons is a real disease, but I'm also pretty convinced that it's probably not going to be the start of the biopocalypse. Well, thank you very much. This has been very illuminating. Sure. I really appreciate it, and it's very fascinating machinery you got here. Here's what I learned in my journey. Our bodies are not just an individual organism. We are an ecosystem of literally trillions of organisms. That's what makes a biopocalypse possible. When you talk to people that are in the know, they'll tell you the biggest threat to mankind isn't nuclear war or terrorism, but it's biology itself. The smartest minds in the world literally have no idea what's coming down. As soon as they come up with a cure, the bugs mutate and find their way around it. The bottom line is that this is a war that will never be won. We just have to hope that we win more battles than the bugs do.
Where is Rogan? Why do I get sent to these kinds of things? Hello? This is the kind of place where satanic children drag you into the corn and sacrifice you to ancient gods. I'm dying! I'm more of a beach guy.